So thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to highlight what we discussed. So we discussed business. We had interesting people in the room. The two main speakers were all not working for non-profits. That person dropped off. So and they all, interestingly, one in Lagos, one in Abuja. But what we discussed was strategic influence for societal change. And we're talking about how to scale our impact. So the reality is that a lot of people are actually working. There are different people doing different things. So it's not as if Christians are docile and not doing anything. But the problem is people are using cutlass to hold 5,000 hectares and saying, well, I'm doing my own. I'm doing my own. So we're like, when will we begin to take a break and go and look for tractors and bulldozers or whatever equipment is required to clear 5,000 hectares? And so instead of wasting time saying we're using cutlass, we can actually take a break, leave the farm and go and look for a bulldozer and come in and clear that 5,000 hectares. So that's the strategic thinking we were looking at to look at it. So both of them, one was in healthcare, I think the other one, I can't remember the other industry. But the idea is that, okay, I'm in healthcare. What strategic moves would I make, in this business or in this industrial sector that would give me lasting change? And I think that was the key takeaway for us. How to scale our influence so that we start thinking strategically, going for the jugular and not using cutlass to hold. So here's the conclusion. For me, I said that one of the things I was envisioning, and I always like to pray like Hannah. Hannah in the Bible, Samuel's mom, where she said, God, if you give me this child, I'll give him back to you. So me, I'm saying, God, the kind of money you give me, I want to set up a platform that will aggregate all the development work or anything charitable, anything that is good in this country that is working, whether somebody is serving 5 widows or somebody is running an NGO that is feeding 1 million people, or somebody who is building a framework to educate 500,000 young people. Whatever you are doing is a place that we can all aggregate. But the important reason is that it's not to just make it easy for people to give money or contribute, but it's also for places where you can see interrelationships. So the person feeding 5 widows can connect with the person that owns a farm, who will say, okay, 10% of everything I harvest, I will bring it to this platform and it will be distributed to all the people serving widows at the end of the year. These are the things that could explore and change, because the way we are operating the silo has significantly slowed down the development of society, and it calls for strategic thinking. Thank you for listening. I hope I was audible and clear. God bless.
Yes, sir, you're audible and clear. Thank you so much, sir. So I'm going to call up Mr. Kehinde from the group on compensation and HR to give us a summary from his group. And then Mr. Nichola can come up as well.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Name is Kehinde Tayo. From our own group, it was interesting. Hold on. We're talking about compensation and then human resource. And we're able to highlight certain things that play around within the business work space. One of the things that needs to be very clear for business owners is always said vision, mission. Those things might look very simple, but I think they're very critical in really saying this is who we are, and this is what we stand for, and this is what we're all about. And one of the interesting things is that it helps to shape the caliber or the kinds of people that organization is willing to accept, so that it's not, you don't create commotion within the system. So whatever you stand for, or whatever you decide that this is our mandate in an organization, then it should be very clear. I've been issue like one of the testimonials we have from Pastor Faye. This is who we are. That's where that influence comes from. To be able to say this is what we stand for. These are our value systems, and we've really said a lot in this BAM session, where skill, competence, compensation, cultural fit reward systems are very critical within the work environment space that we find ourselves, to be able to make sure that we're able to promote or champion that gospel, that right information. One of the things that was also highlighted is that every organization truly are really looking for the fruit of the spirit. Then it's just called in different ways. We've coined it in different ways, but in a nutshell, they are asking for the fruits of the spirit. So once, as a believer, once you already have it, without any praying or laying on of hands, you already fit into, even if there's going to be a testing period. I will say, what's it called? The duration which they get to just say, okay, let probation. Within the probationary period, you will have proven yourself over and over again, because there's just no fault in this guy. You are always not found in the wrong circle. When there's a challenge in the office, you are not part of the troublemaking within the system. When there's meaningful contribution, you're making meaningful contributions. So those are also very important in terms of within working, have the human resource. Those are you must be, and we said that for you to be a human, for there to be a resource, there must be a source. So the question is that if you are a resource, because you are indeed a resource, so who is the source? Then are you championing the source through the lens of what you are doing to be able to promote the agenda of the source? And we all know as believers that Christ is the source. So if Christ is the source, then what are we doing in our workspaces? Not championing the cause. So we're already in error if we are not really promoting the mandate of the source within the space in which we find ourselves. They're talking about, so for things, most employees, depending on, we have those that own businesses and they have employees. So we spoke about having templates and then businesses being structured, so it's not scattered, so people can really fit within the space in which they found themselves. And compensation is always a dicey part for who is always right in terms of the employee. Employee has 100,000 to pay, and employee says he wants 200,000. How do you balance that with the realities on ground? Within the BAM space, we've also said that, that's a talk for another day, to be able to really iron it out in terms of, okay, so there's a good vision, there's a good mission, there's a good mandate for you to feel, and your purpose for life, oh, this organization fits it, but this organization is going to pay you 50K. And then the question is that your transport money is 45,000. So, yes, this mission is, when the mission is perfect. This fits into my goals. I will give myself to it. But at the end of the day, what is king? Is it cash is king? So how do we balance that? Because one must eat. So we want to make sacrifices. And one of the highlights of what we said is that for every opportunity for those that have, both employees and for business owners, is that if you are able to, if you're faced with the option of either learning or taking financial compensation, the question is, which one will you take? But we know that when it comes to learning compensation, in terms of the ability to learn, so your employee is not, or your business is not able to, that's for the employees, you're not able to pay you exactly what you want, but there can be compensation in terms of development growth. One of our speakers was, what was important for her at that point where she wasn't paid all that she wanted, but development growth for her was very critical, and that has transformed her in terms of where she is at the moment. So I think businesses, for us BAMers, whether we're employees or we're business owners, is to find a balance around compensations being fair within the realities of the space we found ourselves in terms of what the country offers for people to be able to survive, and also employees also understanding how business owners will, maybe the cap, I don't know how they're going to wear the cap, but to be able to understand that business owners are also very passionate about what they believe, and they really want to push it, and they're looking for people that can buy into their vision and support them to help promote it. So Those are things that we discuss, and I think that balancing discipline, having guidelines, having structures within the system, right compensation, having the right skill set, cultural fit, the right rewards, and also just trusting that the Holy Spirit is indeed in charge to be able to push us and to guide us into all that we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that brilliant summary. So very quickly, I'll call Mr. Nicholas up. And then Pastor Tokpe as well will give us the summary from his group.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Okay, so my breakout session was on proactively engaging the public sector. Even the title, so we were quite interesting. We had about 6 participants on the call. So the first thing we had to do was, establish everyone's mandate, understand the position of what you do. The interesting thing was everybody that was on that call, they're all private sector people. I wished maybe 1 or 2 public sector people were on the call, but they're all private sector, no problem. So we went about it by establishing the mandate for your business in the kingdom. Then we now had to look at it from the perspective of where is that, connection point? One of the participants used a very beautiful, the nexus. How do you connect with the public sector? And we had to establish that, everything is not all gloom and doom with the public sector. 10 years ago, well, more than 10 years ago, actually, when I was in the ministry, one of my the directors then used to say something that if you want the ministry to write you back, for every one letter you want to receive, you have to write 10 times. So but now it's not like that. With the Freedom of Information Act and even with things like social media and everything, they are much more responsive. So we encourage ourselves that there is a need to interact proactively with the public sector, and it has to be done with a kingdom mindset. You need to identify issues. So there were quite very interesting ways, information sharing, because the people in the public sector are working on policies. Look at the tax bill currently, other policies they are working on, and they don't have information from the field. So as kingdom people, as businesses, we have that information. We can share that information with them. Just even if it's as simple as one participant mentioned how they came up with a policy brief to the Ministry of Environment, and they were invited based on that policy brief to make a presentation, and the thing, moved up from there. There's also a key part, which is knowledge transfer. So interacting with the public sector, you show them that you have the ability to also transfer knowledge, and they are willing to do that. They will always open up to that. So we were able to circle around and discover that the public sector, they are in need of help. We shouldn't see them as the enemy. They actually that access to a wider audience. So imagine there was a time we're discussing in our institute about how technical skills were disappearing from schools. So we narrowed it down to Introtech and to something like teaching them technical drawing. So as architects, we're all preparing documents on how we're going to engage the FCDA and FCT, so we can be going to schools, because they didn't have technical drawing teachers. So because of that, and any industry, any society that wants to industrialize, product design, technical drawing, these are basic fundamental skills. So while people were, doing this, some of my colleagues that are also believers were like, this is also an opportunity to go in there, interact with these children, and from the beginning, begin to sow those seeds. So the question is, how do you go about it? You should be ready to interact. You should be able to write. You should be ready to have meetings and even offer to transfer knowledge. It was a very interesting session. We hope that we can build on this, have forums where we can also discuss, so that we can help people identify where they are in the system and how they can plug in, because that's what we also notice. A lot of people maybe are into catering, or you are into farming, but you feel you don't have anything to do with the public, there is something you can do. There is always a problem that you can identify and prefer solutions to. Thank you very much.
So the fourth breakout session, we looked at discipleship and evangelism in the workplace. So we tried to look at a few key issues, some of the basics. So one of which was relational evangelism. So Pastor Iba, brought us that quote from Thomas Aquinas that, preach the gospel at all times, and if need be, use words, meaning that the primary tool, particularly in a workplace setting, that you preach the gospel would be by the way you conduct yourself, and then you shouldn't even need words. And I think one of us gave a good example of someone who got transferred somewhere, and the way he behaved consistently over time, the driver attached him to the company had to himself come and meet him and say, please sir, there's something different about you and I want to know what that thing is. So you see, he never had to open it because the context was that in that country was illegal to preach the gospel. So if he had just gone in to preach the gospel, he would have been in trouble. But you could see that I got to a point where the person had to ask. So we also looked at another important thing is also about having patience over the course of your engagement with colleagues and with subordinates. You need to give people time, and we need to understand that our own role really is to sow the seed. It's not our duty to bring about the change. You sow the seed and give that patience over time. Then we also emphasize the need, and again, Pastor Iba also gave us another good illustration also that the gospel itself is already offensive. So in as much as you can, please try and also not add to the offense that is already on ground. So the manner in which you present it, because the gospel, it's very easy to become snobbish because you have a higher moral standard. So we try to look at the fact that within that workplace context, you must avoid becoming snobbish just because you are trying to bring the gospel to people. See how much you can soften it and slip it in easily. Then we also looked at the question of power play within the office space, things like apologetics and intellectualism. So just looking at a broad brushstroke of the kinds of things that play out in the office space, and the fact that with these things is that if you do not have enough knowledge and broad context, then it becomes difficult. And one of our sisters gave a good example that they were trying to minister to someone, and the person, and I don't know about you, but you have noticed that particularly people who already have some knowledge of the gospel before now, who are not believers, the moment you just bring it, all their defenses go up instantly. I was once a chapter president of a full gospel chapter. And that our full gospel chapter, then what used to work for us was that, it was a launch hour chapter. So it was a launch hour business professional. So when you invite people, we won't tell you it's a full gospel. We just say, come for launch hour. And also a lot of people come, and the person who gives the story, we tell them strictly, do not start with anything spiritual. So you just tell your story. Then towards the end, you begin to show how it was the grace of God that brought this about. And we see people break down because they come, their guard is down. So when the thing hits them, before they can quickly pull that guard up, the thing has already, it has already hit them. So we said, there's the need to do that. That sometimes you have to soften it. It's just by taking interest in what the person is doing that opens that door for you to begin to minister. Then, of course, we said, look, the place of character and excellence, things that Emmanuel Tarfa has been mentioning, we can't do without it, because it is those things that would make you indispensable, that particularly for people who are a more hard nut to crack over the course of time, that you display those things and you keep growing in them. A time would come where ultimately those people would themselves be the ones to come to ask you. But we now also tackled some difficult questions. I do not promise that we gave answers to all of them, but we'll also throw the questions at you and let's all contend with them together. So one of the questions to ask yourself is, when do you switch? Because we said there's a need to understand that you should not use respect to overreach people. So if, for instance, you are the boss in an office and you put a flyer for a program in your church, everybody responding may not respond necessarily because they want to respond, but it might be somebody who just in that season needs to buy your favor and is responsible. So we said we need to understand those dynamics and be careful how we do that. But we now also said the difficult question is that when you have given somebody rope for a time, when do you know when is the time to strike, to now really impose and now in a sense almost forcefully invite the person or try to, become a little bit more forward than just using infiltration. So we didn't exactly have the 100% answer, but we know that it lies in somewhere in flowing with the spirit. And the spirit might tell you that with a particular person, use a more direct method. With somebody else, you have to give them some more time. Another difficult question we dealt with was, when and how do you know it's time to cut off a team member? So look at it from the context of someone who you are discipling and you know his issues, is really from the viewpoint of the fact that he has not received Christ, and you are trying to, but he's also, in addition to that, also creating problem. Maybe he has even started recruiting an army of rebellion in the office. So when do you cut off, a team member that you are trying to influence, disciple, and evangelize? So we did not exactly have the answer, but we said a few things. One, we said when there's motion and there's progress, the person is showing progress and motion, perhaps we should allow patients, have his full work. We also said that it's also important to note that, first of all, the issue of cutting people off in terms of firing people is not itself bad, because there are sometimes that it is for the person's benefit. You have to release them and let them go, so that we don't allow that pressure of saying I can't cut somebody off, to now stop us from, yielding to the spirit. Then one of the last issues that we dealt with is the issue of setting boundaries and conditioning the environment early, particularly early enough, because sometimes part of what we said is, particularly when you are a subordinate in the workplace, how do you quickly establish your boundaries so that people already know, so that you don't wait until they have gotten into a compromising situation? So if I have a practical case of this one, where a friend, a classmate, works in a public sector place, invited me, come and do a proposal to train our people, since I see you do a lot of training work. And I came and I did proposal. I did the proposal the first time, it didn't sail through. After a while again, she called me, I did proposal the second time, it didn't sail through. Then on the third or the fourth attempt, the proposal sailed through, but last minute, they now hijacked it and gave it to someone else. And the person ran the training, and it wasn't me, but it was my proposal. But, I didn't mind. So a time finally came where she had gotten sufficiently senior enough, and I did the same proposal again. And the time for training came, and I didn't exactly hear from them. Then the next thing, I just get a call, quickly send your account number for payment to be made. So I was a little confused. But I said, well, when it's money coming in, it's never a bad thing. So I sent account number, and money was paid in. But I didn't do any training. So at that point, I now knew that I had fallen into this trap. So, it pained me because, and I needed the money at that time. So in fact, the story was even worse. So after the money came in, money had already come in. I had almost started spending that money when a call now came. I said, hey, please, out of that money that came in, one of our colleagues lost her husband. She needs to relocate. We just needed a way to quickly settle her. So that's why we put this together. So keep X amount and then hand over X amount to her. So, but by that time the deed was done. So it's part of what we are saying. How do you set the environment on time so that you don't wait until you are you understand, you are already inside it before you are trying to say, no, I don't do this kind of thing. And of course, imagine if I had said it at that time, I'll look bad, because we have paid the money and it's not even as if we want to do a bad thing. We are trying to help, somebody who lost a husband and all. So after that time, that same colleague called me to do proposal. I did again, but when I sensed the same thing wanted to happen again, I just didn't have the courage to look at the point, because I had not set the environment on time. So I had to just stop picking her call. So later she saw me, I was like, what happened now? The money was there. This one, that. I just let the matter slide like that. So we are just saying that there's a need to be proactive. So we also gave the example somebody gave us about one of our bosses who also did not want all this compromise. So whenever he sensed that a meeting called or people coming to see him would try to compromise him, part of his strategy was, I had an old King James Bible, mighty one, leather bound. So he will put it under his armpit and enter the meeting. So I know once he enters the meeting with that, he has already set the environment. You know that this one, you can't discuss this kind of thing. So they just eat lunch over a very awkward silence and call the meeting off because they already know that this one, there's no way he can play that game we want to play. So we just thought that, these are things that in the workplace, particularly when you're an employee, you might need to set that environment, set those boundaries on time. So it's not until your boss has said, let's go for a meeting, you are in a strip club, you are not trying to pull back, and then it becomes a problem. So you need to, so that they know you quickly on time. And sometimes it's better they know you on time and they think they can't work with you and they sack you. So you are free quickly on time. So these are some of the things we looked at in the group, and we believe these things will continue to brood on and get more clarity on.